Hello and welcome back to Inside Update, brought to you by Inside Investigator, nonprofit journalism to root out corruption in Connecticut. Exciting stuff to announce. First, this show is going to be available on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon starting in January 2024 through CT Politics TV. So you're still going to be able to watch this wherever you're watching or listening right now via podcast or YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. But we're also excited to be reaching a wider audience and keeping them informed through, I guess, what we'd call traditional media channels, right? Folks actually turning on their TV and being able to plug into this program. You'll also notice today is just Marc and I, so we have a smaller team taking a look at two specific articles. First, we're going to talk about the continuing paper road dispute in Canton, and we're going to talk about the DCF commissioner stepping down in the new year. We'll do some housekeeping stuff at the end, but let's dig right in. The paper road thing, this conversation has continued, Marc. I was at the meeting last night, but do you want to bring us up to speed, I guess, and then we can chat about what happened last night as well?
Sure, sure. So this story came to us from a tip, and I swear our best stories come to us from tips from the public, and people reaching out saying, "Hey, can you look at this?" And um, that story. I mean, I kind of thought there'd be some interest in it, but not to the extent that there was. That's the original story really blew up, and it's so there's a landowner in Canton, Connecticut. He's a guy named Lansford Perry. He owns a lot of businesses and he owns a lot of property. He's actually one of the top 10 largest property taxpayers in the town of Canton. He also sits on the Planning and Zoning Commission there as a commissioner. And he bought a piece of property called 160 Bear Road. It's about 66 wooded acres. And he wants to utilize a paper road, which is a road that only exists on paper, uh, essentially town property, to build a driveway into that forested area and off a road called Shallot Meadow Road. The neighbors of Shallot Meadow Road are not too pleased with this idea. There's a lot of questions being raised as to, why he needs to build the driveway there when he already has two other driveway access points to the property from other roads. And they're also concerned about what he's going to do with the property when he gets there. He's only applied to build the driveway, nothing else. So there's really nothing more the town can consider other than the driveway proposal. What kind of really made it more interesting is a former state senator, Kevin Witkos, who was recently elected first selectman of Canton, and his house sits kind of sandwiched between that big 66 acres of property that Lance Perry owns and another big piece of property that Lance Perry owns, and he has a shared driveway with Lance Perry. So there were a lot of concerns about conflicts of interest. Witkos has recused himself from discussing the matter at all, which, is the right thing to do, and he's been very good about that. But the neighbors are upset, and I have to say, Mr. Perry's response to the neighbors has probably not done him any favors. There's some personal disputes at play here between him and the guy who lives right where the paper road is, and accusations that of threatening and harassment and all this kind of stuff. And in his last email to the Board of Selectmen, Perry basically accused the neighbors of being against farming and poor people, I believe it was. He insinuated, the thing is, nobody really knows what he's going to do with the property, and he hasn't given any kind of clear signal. He said it's going to be used for agriculture and then forestry and then possibly houses for his family members. And then in the last email, he said, hey, it could be affordable housing. We could put up to 200 units up there. And you guys don't like this because you're against poor people. I don't feel, I doubt that was received well. And, that kind of language coming from a public official on the zoning commission, and I don't know if it's a kind of tactic to like shame a little bit for people being against this thing. So that's kind of where it is now. And I know that you were at the public hearing last night, so I'd love to see what you heard.
Well, well, I honestly, I wanted to start with a compliment to the Board of Selectmen. I mean, as I was headed in there, I was kind of like, oh man, am I about to see a blow up and people really kind of getting out of hand. And they handled it really well, to the point that as I was sitting in the hallway after the meeting, kind of putting together some notes and trying to get the recording put away for our reporting team, someone walked out and I just overheard them saying, wow, that was one of the most efficient meetings I've ever been to in this town. So that was nice to hear. And to your point, Mr. Whitkos left at the beginning of this, and he left the room, he left the building as far as I can tell, and he didn't come back. So not only did he recuse himself, he removed himself entirely. And Stephen Sedor, I believe his name is, the vice chair, really did a great job just talking this through. It's one of the things I think you like to see when there are high emotions in a room, is someone who's able to bring the temperature down, set clear guardrails, and the conversation proceeded really clearly from there.
Yeah, I think the Board of Selectmen has, behaved very admirably with all of this. I mean, they didn't have to do a public hearing for this. They chose to, just so that, those residents would feel like they were being heard. And this gets into a kind of a interesting area of property rights and zoning, and who can build what where, and town owned property and things like that. So yeah, it's certainly interesting. And following the public hearing, they're going to have to decide whether or not to approve this driveway.
So I have this for you. So this was the vote was taken last night.
Oh, really?
This is wrapped up. So, we're going to have this written up. It'll be on the website, insideinvestigator.org, before this is released. Inside Update is released to the public. So if you are watching or listening to this right now, go to insideinvestigator.org to read the details. But I do want to, I guess, kind of walk through here. In the end, I'll cut to the chase. There was a motion to deny this that passed 3-1. So it was not granted. And I thought that it was really interesting and well thought out. Obviously, the public comment part, first of all, no one there were, I believe, 14 or 18 people online. I couldn't tell if it was technical difficulties or something else, but no one online provided their thoughts. And there were a few people who did in town, in person. Some of them were in support of this being done. Some were against, neighbors, old friends. It's a small town. There was a lot of camaraderie and familiarity there, even despite the fact that it was obviously a contentious issue. What this hinged on, though, at the end of it, was that the board seemed to agree that this kind of step should be done sparingly. They define themselves as stewards of public property, and that it should really only be done in unusual circumstances. And that was shared by 3 of the 4 board members present. And there was also some discussion about a lack of clarity in the historical record about this space particularly, because part of the argument was that there had been permission granted, or that it was grandfathered into the previous owner, that this easement, this paper road, this access across public property should have been granted. And that was really what the argument in favor of it came down to, at least from the public discussion standpoint. But they said, when the board members got into their discussion, they said, listen, first of all, we think this has already gotten more attention than it should have, but that the public road, or the paper road, it was designed for a public benefit. But in this case, it seems like it was actually going to do a lot of harm to the public who would be affected. And this one individual had these other 2 driveways and access points that he could be using. let's let sleeping dogs lie and let's put this thing to bed right now. So by 8:03 p.m., this conversation was over. The motion to deny passed 3-1, and they kind of just put a bow on it. They had more business after, and the vast majority of the room stood up, quietly filed out, and let the meeting continue.
Well, I'm glad it wrapped up by 8 because I was worried for you. I was like, this thing's going to go on forever, and you're going to be stuck driving home at like midnight or something like that. So, oh, okay. Well, this is news to me. So I'm getting it. I'm getting my news from Inside Investigator as well. Yeah, it's what was I going to say? One thing I want to point out is like when they mentioned like this has gotten more attention than but nobody else was paying attention to it. And obviously, we can't watch 169 towns in Connecticut. So when somebody reaches out with a story that's, interesting and brings up a lot of issues, we can move on that and, bring attention to it. Because, a lot of the comments that we saw online were from people in Canton who had no idea this was going on. And that's part of the loss of local newspapers and things like that. So just to any new viewers, if something's going on that you think deserves some attention, please reach out to us.
Yeah, I'll say two things. One, specifically, Canton town communication was brought up in an unrelated agenda item earlier in the meeting, saying that the town has suffered. Specifically, it was brought up that the town does not have a newspaper of record. They're posting their stuff in the Current and other statewide newspapers to meet the public awareness requirements for posting notices, et cetera. But the other part of that is we like to be invited in. I don't think that as a business, we want to be, stepping in saying, oh, we're going to report on something, because that's not necessarily the best role that we could fulfill, is just coming in and making a hullabaloo about something that people are like, come on, man, this is a private issue or a local issue. We don't really need support, or we don't need awareness. It was really nice to hear, and multiple people who I spoke to talked about this, is we're getting information that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And, I think that's part of the proper role of journalism. But you're right. A lot of these small towns, Connecticut's lost around 50% of its newspapers since 2004. If we can be invited into a community and provide a vital public service, it's one of the reasons we exist as a nonprofit newspaper. And I'm really happy to be doing that.
Yeah, there were a lot of elements that I think made this story unique. I mean, it's not something that, typically it's like, oh, there's somebody's trying to build a driveway. We're not going to just cover any old driveway. But there were a lot of unique aspects to this involving, it's in some level I felt bad for First Selectman Whitcoast. It's like you just get elected and now you're kind of stuck in the middle of this thing. And obviously a large landowner who sits on the Planning and Zoning Commission clearly has knows people. So there were a lot of interesting aspects to this.
Yeah, I'll bring up one more thing that I thought was interesting before we move on to the DCF commissioner, and then we'll wrap it up too, just so we're not really here for 45 minutes, though I feel like we could be. Is they brought up that specific issue of someone who sits on a board bringing issues that are relevant to the board they serve on, and every single selectmen and folks in the public as well were very careful to mention, just because you volunteer and you're part of your local government doesn't mean that you're necessarily waiving your rights to get stuff done. And that would be a really rough precedent to set. So I do think that was on their mind as they were doing this, is, yeah, of course, like this guy has, as many people said, given a lot to the community. But even if it was someone who had never given anything to the community, but had stepped up to fill a role in service of their friends, neighbors, and family members, they still need to be able to bring business forward. And that would have been a dangerous precedent to set.
Of course. But it does make people wonder. Right. And that's what brings it up. So
absolutely. Yeah. Skepticism's healthy, without a doubt.
Yes.
All right. Let's move on to the second topic. The DCF commissioner is stepping down. It's been a long year for the DCF. There have been headline after headline. I was told that it's not related, but we're definitely seeing in 2024 DCF commissioner is leaving. Are you optimistic about that change in terms of seeing positive things in the DCF moving forward?
No,
Okay.
no. Yeah.
I appreciate your clarity. But
No.
yeah, I mean, what's going on?
Uh, well, I mean, it's you want to change the head of the agency or whatever, fine. But that doesn't change the way the agency functions. You know, what Vanessa Durante stepped into when she took the role had been building up for 10, 12, 20 years. It doesn't change overnight. And, putting someone new in a leadership position, you know, anything else that comes up, I mean, they can sit there and be like, well, it wasn't on my watch. But I mean, even though like the person stepping into it was like deputy commissioner or something like that,
Yeah, I think been there for 20 years, I believe.
yeah, very, very high ranking. I don't see it as any kind of fundamental change to DCF. You know, these kind of large agencies take, years to like kind of right the ship if they right the ship.
Right.
And, DCF was under, federal oversight for, I think, 20 plus years until it finally just got lifted this past year. And, this past year was not a great one for them as far as some things that came out regarding some of their programs and things like that. So I'm not, I don't see a change in whoever is, labeled the commissioner as being a fundamental change to the way things operate. Uh, I know that in interviews, the newly appointed commissioner kind of wants to highlight the things that DCF does that are good, their wins, things like that, because it's like one of those agencies you only hear about when things go really bad.
Right.
And I think that's a fair thing to point out. But
It's what you want, though, right? I mean, basically, if things are going well, let them do their job. I think at the same time, if you're in public service, that's a tough thing if you're going to spend all your time. I think that can be a double-edged sword. If you're just out there touting your accomplishments, people start to wonder why you're not at your desk working instead of actually, if you're out there.
yeah, I mean, I understand, but it's you also want to point out that some good things do happen, and I think that's kind of a PR move, but understandable. But it doesn't it doesn't mean that like the bad things go away. They're still going to be there. They're still going to happen. I think it has more to do with how you deal with it when it does happen, and creating more transparency and letting the public know that like this is a difficult job and we're doing what we can to get these things right. Um, dealing with humanity can be messy, and when you're trying to do the job that DCF does, um, there's a lot of opportunities for bad outcomes, and that's the nature of the job. So it doesn't get them off the hook for some things, but I think it should engender a little understanding at the same time. But I mean, yeah, you can go on a little PR thing, but I think what they really need to do is, get the mental health aspects of the youth system into better shape, and work on their foster care system and work on their group home system and try to find new ways to do things, avoid some of these difficulties down the road.
Without a doubt. All right. Any last words on DCF or other articles that you want to point people to?
Nope. Still, I do have more tips coming in that I am following up on, involving the agency. So,
all right, that's a good point. Also, we do have a whistleblower portal. So for folks who may be part of an agency that is experiencing some kind of corrupt action or something that needs to be brought to the public's attention, DCF or otherwise, insideinvestigator.org/whistleblower will bring you to a form that details not only the protections that we offer under the First Amendment and Connecticut's Reporter Shield Law, but also has a place where you can upload much larger files, kind of clarifies what your rights are, and puts you right into an escalated tips channel, for lack of a better phrase, where our team will be able to evaluate that information rapidly and make sure that we're offering support. Whistleblowing sometimes can unfold over the course of months or years, but there's also stuff that we would move on very, very quickly if it were to come across our desk. I think we'll wrap it up there then. Hearing nothing else then, of course, if you enjoy this show, if you enjoy what we do, if you support nonprofit journalism and you would like more of it, please consider making an end of the year donation to our nonprofit newsroom at insideinvestigator.org/donate. Thank you for watching and listening to Inside Update. A reminder, we're also going to be available with CT Politics TV in the new year. We are going to be taking the week between Christmas and New Year's off, so we will not have another episode before 2024. So we will be back with another episode on January 8th. Until then, be well, stay safe, and stay informed.